This is Blind Ham News with stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. With today's report, here is Steve Bauer, W2QCY.
This is Blind Ham News podcast number 13. I'm Steve, W2QCY. Last time, we spoke about FT8 and learned about what it was, how it worked, and why people like it so much. And this time, we're going to focus more on the accessibility side of FT8 and how it works for people who are blind or visually impaired and how cool it is for them. My guest this time is John, W2QCY. John, welcome into our podcast.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I recall doing something like this for Blind Hams quite a while ago, I think with Joel Case. So nice to be back in some form here, and there's probably since that time been some updates in what we're going to talk about anyway.
Oh, no doubt. There's definitely always change going on. So talk to me about the software that is used and the connection with the radios and the computer. And, well, just tell me how it all comes together for a person who is blind or visually impaired to make it all accessible.
If you are a low vision person and you use the computer with assistive text such as the Fusion product or Zoom Text from Vispero/Freedom Scientific, you probably do a fair amount of what you need to do with FT8 based on what you can do from that side of things. I am not a low vision user. I am totally blind. So, and even those that are would probably very much benefit from the software that we're going to talk about. The software is QLog, and if I get this wrong, well, we'll deal with it. But it came to pass, as it were, that let's see, what does it say in my notes here? December of 2018, an amateur in Virginia, K1HTV, Rich Zwerko, and a gentleman on Long Island, W2 Juliet Delta Bravo, Sam, got together in response to Rich's query I believe it was the WSJTX list. FT8 had recently come on with a bang, as we all know. People began to really embrace it as a way of communicating in contest-style communication, as your previous guest alluded. These are not hello, how are you, and going through the social parts of a communication. They're 5-9, good luck, 7-3, that kind of style. But Rich was wondering if folks who are blind or visually impaired might be able to use FT8. Sam had developed his own logging program, which he connected to FT8. Sam is also sighted, but he's a retired software engineer, so he's very familiar with writing the stuff that probably most of us just dream about, and certainly on my level is dreaming. So Sam had written his own logging program and had given it some text-to-speech, but he decided that, yes, he could add the assets, if you will, that somebody who's blind or visually impaired might need. As the QLog program started, it interfaced with WSJTX, so it requires WSJTX, a radio, and the connection between the computer and the software, the rig interface. As your previous guest mentioned, that is either a USB cable between computer and rig, if the rig, most new rigs do, have their own internal sound card to allow communication between a computer and the radio. So my radio, which happens to be a TS590, my original radio I used for FT8 was a TS480. That required a signal link interface, which is one of, I believe, the two that your previous guest had mentioned. But this radio requires only the USB interface. So that's one issue. You have to negotiate the issues of making your baud rate and all of that work between the two pieces of equipment. Once that's done, you shouldn't have to do it anymore. And if you're like me, once it's done, you try to back up your settings. In my case, using the Kenwood software to back up all the menus and all that good stuff that it's hard to remember when you're trying to redo it. So that works, very well. And so the software you need on the computer end is the QLog software and the WSJTX software, both of which can be obtained from a QLog users group at groups.io. And we can talk about that for show notes later, so people get the syntax correct and they don't have an issue with that. Making sure that they get to join. This started out with 6 beta testers. Myself, K1HTV, who is our cited helper. He has not only tested QLog while watching the WSJTX screen and the QLog screen, so he can give Sam the visual issues that we wouldn't necessarily see and help test. He's worked with many of us to make sure that QLog and WSJTX were running when we had issues, being able to remote into our computers and do that stuff. And there were several others of us located in various places of parts of the country. I can probably give you all their calls if you'd like, but we are still active as beta testers, and we have a Zoom call every Tuesday night, and that's kind of cool. When QLog first started, the only option that you had is actually the one I'm going to demonstrate later, and I'm doing that because it's the first aspect of QLog that we usually tell new users to use, because it's the least complex in things that you have to maybe think about. And when you're trying to get started, you should start at the simple end. What's that thing from The Sound of Music? Start at the very beginning. So we do that, and it's called auto reply. So you press a key. We'll talk about getting QLog and WSJTX loaded in a bit here, but the goal is you press a key. It happens to be F8. And it's called auto reply. QLog looks at the WSJTX screen for contacts for potential FT8 stations, and it looks at stations that match a couple of filters that you set. But essentially, it looks for a station calling CQ. When it finds one, it keys your transmitter and responds. Keys the transmitter through WSJTX and generates the normal response. And these things go along in a sequence, so that's why this can all work. It's part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and that kind of thing in a contact. And you'll see in the demonstration what happens. But it goes through, voices what it's doing, responding to a CQ from W0QA, for instance. Then it gets a report from W0QA. It gives back a report, a signal report. And if all has gone well, W0QA, by example, and W2QCY exchange a Roger 7-3, and the contact is ended and logged. And by logged, I mean it's logged at least via the QLog program, which at its onset was built as a logging program. So it knows how to do that. puts all the appropriate information in its database. In addition, and this is a good thing to have, you can subscribe to QRZ and have the paid subscription, and you have to do that on your own. That's a little bit tricky too, so you might need some sighted assistance with that. I certainly did, and I'm an AT specialist, so I needed some help. But when you do that, your QSO data is automatically backed up to QRZ or QLog. I don't believe Sam does EQSL, but he does QLog and QRZ. And once the contact is logged, you can move on and press the F8 key again and continue answering CQs. From there, we moved on to asking Sam, hey, this is very cool, but could we maybe answer, or could we see a list of stations on a screen on QLog that we could respond to? And so he fixed it to be able to do that. So you can see a list of stations that WSJTX has seen, and you actually can hear, as you maneuver through with your arrow keys, the station call sign, the country, the grid, which is very important for those who do grids, more important for VHF people who are really grid hunters. And we have a couple of those folks on our beta testers and users groups. They really aspire to that. So this has been very cool. You can see the signal strength that WSJTX has given them, the S-meter reading, so to speak. And you can pick a station by pressing spacebar and press F8, and it will wait for that station to call another CQ and potentially answer. So you can pick out specific stations. So if you're hunting for Rhode Island or Delaware or something like that, I picked those because those are sometimes they're really hard to find for people who are working WAS, and you might find somebody there. You can look at, I think we can look at you can look up to at least 20 rows of stations that have been decoded. I think you can go higher than that. I don't look that high because you can confuse yourself sometimes by looking at that many in a row or in a group. So you can pick a bunch of stations that you might like to call or answer when they're calling CQ. From there, we moved on to, well, gee, Sam, that's really nice, but could we call CQ ourselves, which without QLog, the WSJTX user can do. And Sam was able to implement that. So not only can we call CQ in general, we can call some specific CQs like Asia, Africa. I believe it's all the continents. I haven't been in that area of QLog specifically in a while, but I think it's more like the continents you would think about. So that you can do that. We have some filters that will allow you to filter out the stations. Maybe you don't want U.S. stations. You can do that. So the program has evolved as the beta testers have said, hey, this is very cool, but can you add something? And usually, if it's possible, he's able to add it. I have had sighted friends who say that I can do more on my screen with QLog than they can, at least as much and maybe more, which is kind of cool. I'm guessing you might have some questions, so I'll stop at the moment and see if you got some specific questions that'll take us in some other direction, maybe.
All right, for someone that is wanting to get started, they may go, this is really confusing. And I know that there is a monthly Zoom call for people in FT8. Is that a good way for people to step in to learn more and ask questions and maybe to get an Elmer to help them get going?
Actually, it is. And yes, thank you for reminding me. We do a QLog users call. Generally, the the first Saturday of the month at, let's see, let me get the Zulu time change right here. It's 1300 Eastern time, which would be 1800 during this time period, Zulu time. So, and we do it via Zoom. A link is sent out every month. I'm the Zoom host, so you get a link from me with name and my call sign. And the QLog user Zoom call. That is a great way. Usually, several of the beta testers can make the call in it, and we try to do it because we have users outside the U.S. We try to do it at a time where maybe folks outside the U.S. can easily make it. A little hard for some of the people on the Pacific side of our time zones, but they make it. And yes, it's a great way to do that. There are, as you might expect, users manuals for QLog. I think we still have two. We have one that's kind of built for sighted helpers who might be needed to get WSJTX going for somebody who's very new. And I would say that that's probably not a bad idea. If you have an Elmer that you work with on a regular basis, it's a really good idea for them to come see you and make sure that before you start QLog, before you get into that, your WSJTX is working to its capacity, because that just rules out any issues when you put QLog in the mix. Then you know that something is weird on that side, not the other side. There's too many variables. So if somebody can make sure that you are receiving and making WSJTX contacts, that's great. So there's a manual for sighted helpers. There's a QLog users manual. All of these manuals are regularly updated, and they are in the QLog users group at Groups.io under the files section. And if people are new to Groups.io and they're having trouble downloading the files and they contact me, I can provide them another way of doing it. We just keep them there because it's a good repository. Speaking of users, I would say that we have close to 100 people subscribed to the group. We don't have any way of determining whether everybody is up and running with WSJTX in a radio. I can think of one person offhand who told us a while ago that he was waiting for he was either waiting for his radio to be repaired, he was waiting to save his money to get something new. I can't remember which way it was, but he was interested in QLog. There are folks who are using it, as I mentioned before, on VHF. So that is a possibility. FT8, as you might expect, and FT4 have kind of taken over the VHF contesting area too, where you might have seen in earlier days more CW. You're now seeing FT8 because it's designed for weak signals. That's how it started, as your previous guest mentioned. So it's great for contesting kinds of things. Trying to think if we have any other. Well, yes, certainly we can connect people with an Elmer, as you mentioned. That is not unusual, and as you might expect, Zoom and FaceTime here as we're doing it, and other sources of even the good old phone would be helpful for getting people together. Which reminds me that I did not say this at the onset. This is a Windows only program. Unfortunately, Mac users cannot take advantage of this. It was enough for Sam to write a Windows version. I'm pretty sure he's not going to want to write a Mac version. Which brings up, do you need a screen reader on your computer to do this, if this is self-voicing? And I guess I didn't use those words before, but QLog's part of all this is that it self-voices what's happening during a contact. Do you need a screen reader? Yes. because there are times when things go awry and you need to be able to look at what's happening on your screen. Many of us, when we're doing stuff with QLog, we put our screen reader JAWS or NVDA in speech on demand mode, or whatever NVDA calls it. Essentially, speak when we ask you to. And that way you're not having dueling screen readers, QLog trying to tell you something and JAWS trying to tell you something, and you lose not only your own personal focus, but your computer might even lose. It might go to a window where you didn't expect it to go, and you will have to get yourself back where you need to be.
All right, you were going to maybe do a quick demo of what it sounds like when you're running FT8.
I'm going to put the phone up near my computer. I have QLog running because I didn't want to take time to get it going. Not that it takes that long, but time is of the essence here.
Line number UT.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I'm on 20 meters, 14074. Just as a quick aside, the FT8 frequencies, as I believe the previous podcast mentioned, are they're channelized, if you will, on the same frequencies on each same area of the band on each band. However, I learned this the hard way. It's wonderful if you put memories in your TS590 or whatever radio for the FT8 frequencies, but WSJTX really doesn't like that. So it's better if you dial it up or take your memory and put it into VFO and then proceed from there. So I also always say, by the way, that QLog or FT8 is the only mode that you could have your speaker turned down on your radio, because you don't really care what's happening on the speaker, because it's not going to tell you anything. I know there are people who use it and they try to match the tone and they try to do things like that, but I don't need the background noise. So I'm going to press F8.
Auto reply activated.
Okay, it says auto reply. Now it's looking to see if it can find somebody calling CQ on 20 meters. Let's hope. Good thing Steve can edit this out, because it's taking a little longer than I might think. And let me just turn up there are signals. Apparently no one calling
Answering a CQ from Delta Lima 1 Hotel Delta Lima, from Germany, Grid Juliet Oscar 53, transmitting on even.
Okay, we've answered a DL station in Germany. We don't know his QTH, we know his grid.
Waiting for report.
Okay, he's going to give us a report, hopefully.
Received a report of -13. Sending a report of -7. Transmitting on even.
Okay, that was quick. We got reports the first round.
Waiting for a Roger. Received Roger 73. Sending a 73. Logging QSO with Delta Lima 1 Hotel Delta Lima 1. Transmitting on even.
And the QSO has been logged on our end. It'll be logged on the other person's end too, with whatever program they happen to be using, in addition to WSJTX, which also logs for you.
Now you're actually not touching anything.
I'm not touching anything. No, that's a good question. I haven't had to touch anything.
All hotkeys available.
Okay, since I pressed FT8, I could walk across the room. I could go get a drink of water, as long as I could hear the responses to know that that things were happening. Let me tell you something about the report you heard. I always joke that the FT8 mode is the only mode in amateur radio where getting a negative report is okay, because these signals are decoded as, I remember the previous podcast. I don't remember the thresholds, but the gentleman gave the noise thresholds below which a signal can be pulled out. And so a -17 is not too bad. And I forget what the other report was, but that's not bad. That we made the contact. That's all that counts in this. We have people in the beta test group, by the way, who have already made DXCC via FT8. At least one guy, I think Mike, he's going around the second time, trying to do it. I have 96 or 97 countries worked on FT8 since let's see, 2020? Something like that. And I don't know if I'm going to get the last four. They're just, I don't have big antennas, and I don't spend all my time looking for DX. So I doubt I'm going to get DXCC, but I do know that there are places I've worked on FT8 that in my now coming up on 55 years of amateur radio, I have not worked in any other mode. And I'm not a big DXer. So that tells you what, how popular the mode is, I think. That's the first thing it tells you. And secondly, how relatively easy it is to work, a lot of things in a relatively short period of time.
Okay, I just was thinking here, and I don't know, I'm thinking of legalities here. You're sitting there and your radio is handling all the communications. Let's just say that you go off to eat dinner or go take a nap or whatever, and you leave it on. Is that really legal because you're not in control of your station?
It's legal because the radio will not do anything unless I am here to press a key. So there's no robot aspect to this, at least that I know of. I can't do anything to go away and let it sing all night working DX. And that's also the reason why there's only 6 cycles in any transmit and receive exchange. If the contact is not completed in 6 cycles, I believe it's 2 minutes each, the program stops working. The QLog says, WSJTX, which is the controlling program, says, okay, I've done it for 6, I'm not doing it anymore.
All right, so in other words, you're saying that you have to press F8 to initiate the communication between you and another station to exist. And once those 6 cycles are done, it's going to sit there and do nothing until you press F8 again?
That's right. I'm sitting here now, and I haven't done anything, and the radio has not keyed. So if I want to do it again, I have to press F8, or I have to go to do another aspect, maybe call a CQ or look at my screen and see what stations WSJTX is currently seeing, up to the level of how many I've asked QLog to show me. So yeah, that's a very good question though. There's no robot here. You can move out of the room during that cycle, but when you come back, one way or the other, the cycle's going to be over.
So, John, if people have questions or want more specific information about getting started in FT8, are you willing to provide some contact information?
Sure. First of all, I'm good on QRZ. So if somehow you forget this, but remember my call, you will find me. And my call is Whiskey 2 Quebec Charlie Yankee. The email address is Farina, Farina, 1952 @gmail.com. Farina, Farina, 1952 @gmail.com. And I'll be glad to do that.
All right, that sounds good. Well, it sounds like it's a very accessible mode of communication. And once you get past the hurdle of getting everything set up, it looks like it really runs pretty easily.
It does. I think we're up to beta 2.86 or 8.7. I kind of lose track of the numbers because it just is what it is. And I think we've got most things that most people want to do. We didn't talk about another program that can enhance your use of QLog and WSJTX called Spots, but that's another podcast maybe. But that's very good for looking at countries, and especially looking at grids. So if you're a grid chaser on VHF, that one, that program might be very interesting. It was written by and it was just updated by a blind computer programmer who worked for DoD for many years. So,
well, John, we appreciate you taking the time to describe the QLog program and how it all comes together in your demo of FT8. and we'll look forward to seeing this mode of operation continue to grow.
It's certainly growing. I would not have believed. I think it's the fastest growing mode that we've ever seen, at least that I've ever seen. Thank you for asking me to be here. I look forward to getting people ready to go on FT8 and helping wherever I can.
Special thanks to our guest, John, W2QCY, to help us learn more about FT8, which is growing very popular. And be sure to check the show notes for all of the information that he provided during the interview regarding subscribing to the QLog list and the monthly Zoom Tech meeting for FT8 and more.
Have a story or information to submit for the podcast? Send it by email to blindhamnews@gmail.com or call 662-426-6397. That's 662-HAM-NEWS. Thanks for your help.
I'm Steve, W0QA, and that's the report this time. I hope you can join me again for another Blind Ham News podcast. 73, and thanks for listening.